Scott. Here we go.
Hey, I'm Scott Dailey, everybody. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Marketing for a mid-sized cable manufacturer in Riverdale, New Jersey. And the biggest risk I've ever taken professionally is deciding to do business speaking in front of massive audiences with literally no background at all and having done it.
Wow, that's a hell of a risk. So did you quit your job or did you do that in addition to? Tell us about that, Scott.
Yeah, so I've been the Vice President in sales and marketing for a few gigs now, for quite a few years now. And in that capacity, for small businesses in particular, as you probably know, you've got to go hustle, right? It's not like it's not some distinction that's sexy, right? There's nothing shiny about it. You're out there hustling, and you're also the coffee guy, so when you're working for a small business, you're shouldering a lot of these duties. And I've found the fastest path to a qualified candidate, a qualified prospect, is to demonstrate value to them best I possibly can. And I'm sure that to anybody listening to this, that's just a no duh kind of thing. But what I discovered was if I organize a networking event and I feed them continental breakfast and give them an hour to exchange business cards, and then I get in front of them an hour later, they're locked. I mean, they're blinded. They're just obsessed with what I'm trying to teach them. You pair that with giving away your expertise. Don't govern it in any way. Don't sanitize it. Don't be salesy. Don't do any nonsensical parlor tricks. Just give away what you sell ordinarily. And man, I got deals. And so I started doing that. But sort of a cool byproduct of it was that I started to get sought. People wanted me to speak at their events, and I started getting invited to speak at events. So, but yeah, I just kind of invented it as a way to try to get qualified leads. And it did bear that fruit, but it also kind of created sort of a personal identity, which was lots of fun too.
That's awesome. So how did that happen once COVID hit? I mean, did you continue that on Zoom?
Well, it's funny.
Or did that stop?
No, it stopped when I came here, actually. I've done a couple of gigs and I've been invited to a few, but I was doing this 8-10 times a year for a short period during my agency life. And as you might imagine, in the agency side, you can promote personal brand pretty effortlessly because it's so aligned with what you're selling. So it's easy to also say, I'm Scott, I'm an expert, and buy my stuff. When I became the Vice President of Sales and Marketing for this organization, it's just a full-time hustle. And they never had a marketer here before. They only had sort of traditional salespeople. And consequently, I had to roll out systems that never existed here before. SaaS and technology, like a tech stack that never existed here. The tech stack was the back of a beverage napkin, and when it came to like marketing. So I had to introduce this company to sort of an approach to marketing, and we've done that for the last almost 6 years now. So it's been such a intensive, labor-intensive exercise that I haven't had the opportunity to go and do speaking gigs because this has been sort of just occupying my time. And we're talking now about doing some of that stuff, more bent towards our products. But on the whole, I haven't done speaking since I came here, apart from a couple of gigs I've done for some local chambers and things like that.
So Scott, I'm curious. So with coming into a company that doesn't have the background history on that tech stack and understanding what the marketing needs are in a competitive landscape, and I know the company you work for is been around for decades, right? So they've been doing it in a traditional way, and I'm sure that's adopted. But how did you overcome any potential resistance or concerns they had about now pivoting and doing something a little bit differently that would affect in a very beneficial way their sales process when they already might have said, well, we already have sales coming in, and you might be telling them, well, yeah, but we could definitely grow that and drastically improve that with this other component.
That's a great question. Thank you for the observation, spoken like someone who has those problems. When I got to Sava, during the courtship part of things, I stressed up front, and I'm a pretty candid guy. We don't know each other really, but I'm a pretty direct guy, even to the point of being maybe too direct. And so when I was meeting with them during that courtship ritual, where I was determining if they fit for me, they were determining if I'm a fit for them, I was extremely upfront about what you're going to get in me. And I didn't mince my words. I was even direct to the point of risking seeming impolite so that they understood that I'm not I'm going to rely heavily on technology, and I'm going to be a progressive marketer by my very nature, my very disposition. And if you want that, if you want a guy who's going to use, pardon me, he's going to use data to inform what he does next, then I know a guy. If you don't want that, if you want to do things from your belly, and you just want to, you want to do things that are a little more traditional and old-fashioned, then I'm not the guy. And I wasn't trying to win the job. I was trying to make sure that we were going to like each other a month in, 2 months in, 3 months in. And I'm pleased to report that they showed some imagination. Sava, my employer, imagined a marketer in this role, something they had 50 years prior never considered. So I got to give them props for having the imagination to be a small manufacturer, which has this sort of negative, sort of pejorative connotation applied to it. Like, it's dark, it's dirty, it's dangerous, sort of old-fashioned ideas. That's your dad's manufacturer. That's your grandfather's manufacturer. Today, it's much sexier. It's much closer to a retail experience as message, identity, and ethos goes. And so I just stressed to them up front that I'm a guy that's interested in identity and culture and dramatic philosophical shifts in how things are done. And if that's not your bag, then I'm not the guy. And they thought I was the guy, based on, repeated conversations. And now how do I get, there's always going to be some resistance, right? I got to go down to the CEO and ask him to give me money. So there's always going to be that. But I'm pleased to report that I've been here approaching 6 years, and they see what happens when you write articles for 5 of those years. They've, like I said, I got to give them credit. They showed imagination. I'm in an agency world, and perhaps you guys have your agency background too. So you don't want to bring on just any customer. Like, they don't want to bring on just any marketing guy. There has to be some agreement on, like, sort of just philosophical common ground. And I think they saw in me what I remember at one point they asked me, what would you do first, second, third, fourth? I'll spare you those details, but I'll say I told them explicitly what I would do. And some of that was pretty heavy-handed in just its nature. And they were like, whoa, that's intense. But they let me do it. Now, we did it carefully and responsibly, but the long and the short of it is that they put their faith that a modern progressive marketer is going to rely heavily on content and message, is going to make groundswell eventually. And we have. It's actually worked. When I got here, this company's website, and we're a very specific manufacturer, very specific. So these numbers may not dazzle just any audience. But in a B2B space, making ultrafine mechanical cables, I got here on this website. This company's website was doing fewer than 2,000 visits a month. Now it's well over, approaching 6,000 visits a month. A very well-qualified traffic. So that means we did it right. So Jason, I hope I'm answering your question, but it was really just candor and being frank with each other. It was really just trusting that one guy is not I wasn't trying to sell them a bridge. I told them that I have my warts, I have my attitudes. If you like them, hire me. If you don't, the exits are marked.
Wow. Well, I think part of that also is you have some traditional marketing background that doesn't scare them, right? If you were just some social media guy who's like, we need to be on TikTok, Instagram, and if we can do some reels, that would be awesome.
Right.
Instead, I mean, I'm sure they're used to trade publications. I'm sure they're at least a little bit used to email newsletters. But beyond that, there probably isn't a need for as much. To your point, 6,000 well-qualified prospects every month is awesome.
Yeah, the traffic is great.
But I think a lot of that, the reason that you're able to do that is because you're also steeped in tradition. Would you think that? Does that sound right, or am I totally off base here, Scott?
No, I mean, my background is in traditional and digital marketing, and during the digital component was during its sort of adolescence, right? Like when something called HubSpot came up with a word called inbound, and then that became what it's called. And that was 08, 09. I remember it well. I remember talking to the CMO of HubSpot. His name was Mike Volpe, 100 years ago, through whatever was popular at the time. I mean, it could have been Foursquare, but I worked in a traditional environment where we're doing a ton of print for companies like Revlon and Home Depot and Thomasville Furniture, yes. But we were also rolling out at its sort of infancy, an elevated sort of segmented email marketing, not just hit everybody agnostic to what they want to hear from you. So there was segmentation was coming of age. So between 2006 and say 2013, all that stuff was coming of age very rapidly. So yes, Phil, to your point, I have a background that is customary and traditional that deals in printed pieces of collateral and mass mailing them out. And then also working with Home Depot on their marketing, their email segmentation, which was massive in its nature. I was all behavior based, but SaaS hadn't caught up to how well segmented reporting was at the time. And so you couldn't do a lot of things you'd want to do today, like attribution modeling, because it was just sort of in its infancy as devices capture that information. So yes, to your point, when I met with Sava and we were doing that sort of courtship ritual, I probably gave them a great deal of comfort in just them hearing from me things that they understood well too. I wasn't going to throw away the baby with the bathwater. This company didn't require me. They were fine for 50 years without me. I had to enter the situation with the requisite humility. I can't be so impressed with myself that I'm saying to them, oh, man, how badly you need me. They didn't need me. They're fine. What I did was expand their peripheral vision. What I did was put systems in place that help them respect and appreciate more the delicate nature of a lead and how to nurture one without flailing your arms in the air and scaring it off. And so I hope I answered the question there a little bit. Did
Absolutely.
Okay.
You absolutely did. Thank you.
And I think to that point, you bring up a couple of things that I wanted to just hone in on, Scott. So one is, having those systems in place is allowing you as a data person to be able to say, yes, this is the strategy that I brilliantly came up with, right? is working. And these are the results. I can track with analytics how the increase in visitors. I can track the pipeline. I can connect the dots between all of these efforts because we do have the tech stack in place. So it's not just you going to the CEO and saying, hey, I need more money, or I need money in general for these marketing ideas, but I'm also investing in the foundation to be able to track from a return on investment perspective that everything I'm presenting to you as a team, to a company, I'm going to be able to have those data sets to say, yes, this worked, or wait a second, it didn't work exactly the way we wanted it. Let's make some tweaks to improve it, instead of just quarter after quarter saying, oh, I need another 50K to put into the marketing budget without proving to them that that investment is actually working. So I commend you for that, because I think that's where a lot of companies, I know that probably all three of us have spoken to over the years, and we're all coming from, the agency world, just dump money into marketing without knowing if they're actually getting a return, whether it be digital, going to trade shows, what have you, right? I think that's a commonplace mistake, and it's not because it's a mistake that can't be avoided. It's just they don't have the proper foundational tools in place to measure that. I'm curious though, you mentioned about this big shift in, going back now almost 20 years, but the birth of segmentation, of dynamic content, and all these new tools. A company of your size, are you guys looking ahead at AI and other technology that's coming and finding ways to kind of tinker with that now? Or is it more like, let's sit back, kind of like it's new, we're going to wait a few years, kind of see what happens as things evolve, and not get on the bandwagon just yet, because either A, we don't need to, or we don't want to kind of risk the success we're having currently, with everything that's going on?
Yeah, I'm at a half or an all day. I think it's a half day or all day session tomorrow at the Salesforce building in Manhattan that's exclusively discussing their AI implementations and how to leverage them. So that I'm going there tomorrow with one of my colleagues, John, who is our marketing coordinator. He and I are going there tomorrow to attend this all-day seminar on how to leverage their AI technologies as they roll them out. So to answer your question as painlessly and quickly as I can, yes, we're leaning into that. We already use AI. We already use what's now called Gemini, but a week ago it was called Bard. We use it. We use ChatGPT. We've been using it for over a year, I think, or at least as long as Chat's been live. We've been using it. And then as soon as Bard rolled out, we started using it literally the same day. And we've been using it since to do what I would consider to be busy work so far. Crafting outlines. I don't let it write for us at all. I will not. And I understand it's in its infancy, so I don't, like most of us, I don't know what I don't know. But in the near term, we do not let it write anything for us at all. We ask it to pull resources from us, and then we actually verify it because it's frequently wrong. So we then have to verify the sources. So there's a lot of work involved in using AI and teaching it to be a better bot for us. And I suppose that's the proposition: is we keep teaching it, it gets smarter. But yes, we are using it almost exclusively for content, but I just use it today to complete a monthly report that I've been crafting for a couple of weeks now. That's sort of an all-inclusive report. I'm using it to do all of my math for me. I'm using it to do all of my tables for me. So yes, we are leaning heavily into AI, but we're not counting on it. We're not calling on it to be a substitute. I tell my colleague John all the time, who's in the first third of his career, and I'm sort of entering the last third of my career. Don't ever take the marketer out of the marketing. My former boss, Larry Balin, used to say it all the time. Don't take the marketer out of the marketing, and tech wants you to do that. So there is a balance. You have to be sort of disciplined and be aware of that ex machina line where you can go too far, and now it holds the cards. So we use it, but we control how we use it, and we do not, at least today, allow it to speak for us.
Yeah, I think augmenting your own intelligence with the AI is the way to go instead of artificially replacing it. The ex machina, like you mentioned, man, that is problematic for many groups. And I think a lot of organizations, I think, that are younger, that are just looking to cut costs, are not doing what you're doing. So kudos to you, Scott, for doing that. I mean,
we see it all the time. We see content that is clearly written by a bot. We can tell because we work with it. We test it. We look, show me how you would say this. We want to see how machine-like it sounds. And we can spot the way, for example, I can tell how Gemini is talking because I've talked to it so much. I've spent hours and hours and hours talking to it. And I mean, in the office, on flights, on business, like I just constantly am talking to it so I can understand how it wants to influence me. And I can see in our competitors, in some cases, that they're just throwing up whatever it spit out. Give me 5,000 words on X, and it just throws them up there. That we don't know yet whether or not that's going to yield them the results they want. I hope it doesn't, but it might.
Right.
It might, and then we might have to adjust. Maybe AI is meant to be equal to a human writing eventually. But right now, we don't do that. But we do lean on it heavily for source material.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of the tough stuff, though. I mean, we've talked about some of the highlights. Let's talk about some of the challenges that you've had, Scott. Have you guys had any big failures in the marketing and sales area that you were like, holy crap, I didn't see this one coming?
I guess you can qualify this as not seeing it coming because it's not an approach I've taken to demand gen in the past until now. So indulge me a little latitude. I try to set the table here. If you have a qualified email address, well, there's only a few ways you got it. You got it from D&B by telling them to give you some SIC. You gave them some SIC codes and they gave you a list that's 25,000 email addresses long, or some alternative that sells you lists. The alternative to that would be to buy the information through a third party like a trade pub. Informa comes to mind. Informa in my world is a gigantic trade organization. And they won't give you the email addresses, but they'll, through their lead gen and their MQL programs, they will give you access to their list and you can market to them without ever really having access to the individual. It's another way to do it. A third way to do it is to hire some third party to just do appointment setting for you. There's a million ways to do the thing that you need to do, which is get a customer. But they all deal in outreach. They all deal in my opinion, starting with something simple like a LinkedIn profile or an email address, some simple piece of data. And then the problem immediately becomes the quality of it. So if you found a channel where you're going to get your email list and you're going to do demand gen against these 2,000 email addresses, well, now you got to ask yourself, how good are they? How deliverable are they? How well aligned with your segmentation are they? There's all kinds of questions that D&B is not going to answer for you. And I'm not denigrating D&B, but I've used them in this capacity. And in my experience, it hasn't been particularly fruitful. I've used third parties to do appointment setting, offshore and domestically. Same thing. It's just, in that particular case, you lose, our color is that wall. You lose the brand, you lose the wall, you lose the color, you lose the identity. You get cold emails with no messaging and no formatting in the style of it. You've seen them. And they don't even have an opt out in them. They actually tell you to reply with no thanks if you want to. Like, it's just corny and hackneyed, very low rent. And perhaps some of your listeners are going, oh my gosh, I do that. Well, don't do that. So when you ask what challenges have we faced, I'm sorry to have to set it up like that, but something I did not expect was we are doing it differently. We are getting email addresses through appending exercises, and it's fascinating to me how hard it is to acquire email addresses through public information and verify its accuracy. So that is something I never did, but I never did it the way we're doing it, but I still prefer it. It's slower, dramatically slower than calling D&B and going, send me 25,000 email addresses, infinitely slower than that. But the quality of it is within our control. Whereas everything else I just described to you is a third party promising things to you. They're making promises of the validity of the data you're buying from them. I'm owning it. I'm handling it. So I get to look at every one of these and decide, are they qualified? Yes, that's slow. Yes, Phil, that is an extremely challenging proposition because it's a slog. You have to wait to accrue qualified email addresses over time through research. Now, it's powered in part by software, so it is somewhat automated, but you still have to validate all that information, or you're just going to spam people who are going to opt out. And well, what's the point in that? Why, like, and to your point, Phil, if I do that and it fails, well, then I'm an idiot. I'm a bad marketer. You shouldn't put your faith in me. You shouldn't trust me with the paycheck. But that's not what happened. They are engaging. They are motivated. They are enthusiastic, and our data says it. And these are totally icy cold people, and they're not opting out. They're not saying, go away, Scott. And they've never heard of Scott in their lives. And I believe it's because we're doing the painful approach, which is slow, but qualitative. It's burdensome and frustrating, but it yields me an engaged set of eyeballs. So,
well, it's like your in-person meetings, though.
It is.
Right? I mean, that's the
closer
thing.
To that. Yes.
It's like I can shake your hand, you give me your card, that
Yes.
email is valid.
Yes.
I can know that you work at XYZ company. I can do the research to validate the email address.
Yes.
I send something that you might want, and now looky here, we're shaking hands again. I mean,
Yes.
it is slower, but I would argue that's always going to be more effective.
Yes, I think of the funnel as following. When I did a lot of business speaking, I used to present this funnel diagram, which who doesn't have those? I had my own personal version of it, and I would put the funnel in three fundamental audience types. I call them curious, working, and ready. And I always taught the audiences I was speaking to that same vocabulary. What is curious, what is working, what is ready? They are what they sound like to you. And I'm sure that they're intuitive. That's why I gave them intuitive names. If they're curious, they're kicking tires and they're outside the funnel. If my email lists, if I can't qualify the quality of my data, well, they're going to all be curious. I don't know anything. I don't understand what's going on. So if I don't understand what's going on, well, then I certainly don't have any right to succeed. Because why would I ever enter into a plan that I don't understand? I can't validate the quality of the information I'm using to create the plan. And then when it falls on its face, well, who do I have to blame if not myself? Like, who else is there in the room? So I've found that slower but more qualitative. It's less sexy. It's a lot less fun. But in the SMB space, which I'm sure you guys talk to SMBs all the time, they get this stuff wrong constantly because they're chasing some lofty idea with, frankly, lousy tools. So we obsess here about control and authority over the information because then we rig the system. The results are a lot less shocking to us when they're good, when we spent all this time up front validating the list. Wow. But I did not, to your original point 15 minutes later, I didn't know that it would be such a slog to do that. I thought it would be a little bit easier. It isn't easy. It's not at all.
So Scott, with that process, I'm just curious, you mentioned, obviously the human elements to cleaning that data, acquiring it. Are you using other third-party tools for like data hygiene and checking the validity of the email address as well?
Yes.
I imagine.
Yeah. So obviously we're at the mercy of algorithms, right? And the quality of the algorithm and that particular piece of software, it determines our success, right? So we vet tools, and we have part of our tech stack are tools that I'll forego their explanation now because we could get into the weeds with that stuff. But yes, we have tools that validate our assumptions and validate everything. So there's checks, there's kind of points of redundancy or fault tolerance, if you will, to borrow an IT metaphor. So there's battery backups for the battery backups for the battery backups. So when we send out a list, when we send out a demand gen email to 5,000 prospects, we're really, really impressed with the open rate. And that's just a subject line, right? That's nothing. The subject line worked. The open rate worked. And we hit them as many as 5 times before we abandoned them and put them into a nurture program. So think about getting hit cold 5 times and you're still not opting out. So they enjoy hearing from it. It may not be a fit. The timing might be wrong. The product might not be perfectly aligned with their immediate application needs. Table all that. Their behavior in the data tells me they're enjoying hearing from us. So I'll take it because they're not a buyer today, but I bet you they will be one day.
Yeah, and you hit 2 good things, and then just not to belabor the topic, but I think it's an important one where you can't rely on third parties, saying, "Oh, we have a 98% deliverability."
That's not true.
And it's not true, and they're always going to say that. And I know in our world, whenever we hold the client that's talking to one of those types of organizations, is ask them what their policy is. If you send the email and 30% bounce back, are they going to give you a refund and a credit? No, they're just going to give you more bad emails, right? They're never going to admit that. And what good is that, right? Then 30% of the new batch of bad emails is going to bounce again, which is going to hurt your sender reputation. So I think that's really important, like that you brought up. You can't trust what these other companies are saying. No. You have to do your own independent, research, if we want to call it that. Another piece, which you alluded to, is the content. So, there's so much of, spray and pray kind of methodology out there, which we all know doesn't work. All 3 of us probably easily get a few hundred emails combined a day.
Sure.
Crap, right? As the head of HR, as the head of this, I'm not the head of HR. Like, do your freaking research, and know who you're emailing. And so I think the point of why you're seeing that, which again, this, but for the listeners, the reason that the success that you're describing is because you have the good data, but you also know what their problem is. You know how to solve that problem, and you're able to talk to that specific problem. So now that the content is addressing pain points that they're actually identifying with, and to your point, Scott, it may not be a pain point today, maybe a pain point in the past or something they have in the potential future, but they see the value. And I think that's the bottom line of why you're not getting those unsubscribes, right? Which we all could, I think, agree on, is they see the value in what you're talking about. And so they're sort of putting it on that back shelf, and they're like, all right, we're not ready for it yet, but this is something we want to hold on to. And now we're curious of what's going to happen. What kind of more information are we going to get from Scott's company that could actually help us, either today or in the future? So it's definitely, to your point, you said, Phil, about it's a lot of work to make this type of approach successful.
An enormous amount of work.
But if you're willing to do that, and you have the team, and you have different tools, and maybe AI can help a little bit in the back end, and you know how to use these tools, then it becomes a little bit more tangible to make that a reality.
Yeah, you actually brought up some really good points there. When you kind of just said what I think. The reason I think our campaigns are showing such encouraging numbers, setting aside the holy grail, which is a lead, right, or an appointment, right? Just setting it aside. And I'm not trying to be glib by setting aside the ultimate prize, but we live in a world where we high-five each other for the tiny hash marks between the big milestones. The big milestones don't come like the tiny victories do. And if all we did was hinge our sense of professional identity on the bell ringing, we'd be miserable. If we don't get excited about the appointment or a callback or something, well, then we're missing the point, because only this much deals in the bell ringing. This much deals in what caused the bell to ring. So when you talk about content, for example, I'll give you an example. My team and I have adopted a philosophy. It's very, very simple, and I wish other SMBs would adopt it. And it's, in our particular case, because we make miniature wire ropes and cable assemblies. What I tell our team, and my team has adopted this philosophy, is this. We seek to change what you think is reasonable to expect out of a cable maker. We seek to change what you think is appropriate to expect out of a manufacturer of wire ropes. And the more we do things with content, with visuals, with appearance, with red walls, for example, the more we do to demonstrate that we think that we're Nike. We don't think we're Cable. We think we're Adidas. Mm-hmm. We're under the impression that we're some sexy retail brand and we're going to behave that way. Well, now we're fighting up. We're fighting above our weight. We're dressing for the job we want. And I could use a million other hackneyed metaphors and analogies, but to your point about content, if we give them a content experience that doesn't seem like every other cable maker they would shop with, well, they're more likely to check us out because of what you said. What are they going to do next? What are they going to say next? Mm-hmm. These guys, I'm curious about these guys. We don't show them, our landing pages are not static. There's videos, and you press the button and they talk directly to that segment. You want to buy pulleys? You got a guy talking about just pulleys. You want to buy stainless steel cable? There's a guy talking about cut lengths of stainless steel cable. And when we do this, not only do we, as you pointed out, Jason, not only do we increase dwell rate, we increase a little bit more time that they'll just sit and look at our mugs yakking away. But something else happens. The red wall takes over. And now Sava becomes synonymous with cable. Red becomes synonymous with cable. And you just beat it into them over and over again. And suddenly, when you think of, I test my team all the time. When you think of UPS, what color comes to mind? They go, oh, brown, that's easy. All right, great. So when you think of Tide laundry detergent, what color comes to mind? They go, oh, like an orangish red. Okay. So when you think of cable, what do you think of? That's what we're doing. And if we don't go to work thinking that way, then we'll think small. We'll think small, baby, manufacturer, tiny enclave in New Jersey. Who cares? We don't. We come in and go, we want to take over the world today. What does that look like?
Well, you're all about the experience, and that's super important. Every piece along the way that you've mentioned is all about the experience, from the landing pages to the email marketing to everything, right? So before we ask kind of a wrap-up question here, I want to make sure that folks know how to get a hold of both of you. Jason, I'm going to start with you here. You want to get to know more about Jason Kramer? Check him out on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/Jason Lee Kramer. That's Leigh, Kramer with a K. And then if you want to get to know more about Scott Dailey, you can go to linkedin.com/in/Scott P. Dailey, Dailey. Now with that, Scott, let's get really small here. What is the first step that a company like yours needs to do in order to get started on this awesome customer experience journey?
They have to abandon what they thought. They have to completely abandon how long they thought it would take. They have to stop thinking that I understand that with this came instant gratification. I understand that. I have a 19-year-old son. He does not delay gratification at all. I jokingly say to my colleagues all the time, when I was growing up, if you wanted to see Linus and the Great Pumpkin, you had to wait till October to see it. Now all you got to do is just bring it up on Paramount Plus and boom, then you can watch the whole Peanut. You can watch the Christmas ones, the Halloween, whatever you want to watch. So we don't postpone anything anymore, right? We just rush towards the thing we want to feel most. We want serotonin now, and we don't have to wait anymore, right? So the first thing I would tell a small, medium business, even if they're not a manufacturer, is stop, abandon any notions you have about how quick this is going to work. The second thing I would tell them is you have to write content, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of words, and then thousands and thousands more. And you have to do it for years. And then when it doesn't work, then you get to whine about why it's not working. You don't get to complain 6 months in, 8 months in, 18 months in. You have to do more than the guy next to you or gal next to you is willing to do. You have to do more than what anyone expects is reasonable. And that's why we adopt that attitude. We dress for the job we want. We came to work today, so we don't want yesterday's gig. We want tomorrow's gig. And that may seem trite and even a little T-shirt-y, but I have never in the 20-something years I've been doing this, 25 years I've been doing this, I'm an old man now. I've never found anything that's a substitute for pace and hunger. I've never seen anything drive my success more than those two things. I'm going to move faster than you and obsessively. And if you can move faster than me and more obsessively than me, you can outmaneuver me. There's a million people, Phil, that know a million things I don't know. I don't know you could fill a warehouse with what I don't know. But you're going to have to sweat to outmove me and outthink me. And that's where I think small businesses need to be, is what What can you do to outmaneuver everyone and move faster than anyone's willing to go?
Yeah. Well, I think obsessively customer focused, I think would be a great name for you guys. I love the red. I love the focus on the experience. I appreciate all you shared today. Jason, any final thoughts from you, my friend?
Yeah, no, I would just say that, exactly piggyback on what Scott said, that, it does take time to see these results. And the one thing I will add, as Scott mentioned, any software does not solve a problem. You need the creative thinkers. And just like you said before, you can't take the marketer out of marketing. And so if you're coming to the table and you're trying to come up with all these great ideas, if there's not a strategic approach to it, and you're just going to say, hey, we're going to do AdWords, we're going to do social, we're going to do all these things, and you just throw money at the wall without a plan, there's almost guaranteed to be a failure, or you're just going to walk away before you can actually see the results. And so I think, it's a great way to kind of end this conversation, just to say, be strategic, be smart, and have patience.
Well said.
Yeah. And be curious, get working, and be ready. You're three people.
That was well done.
I think we can all do that. So thank you, Scott.